Now this is one variation of the Ojibwe deadfall. This is a big game getter. This can and has been used in the past to get black bear, as well as it can be taken down to the size for wolverines and wolves, which is approximately this size. You can make it even smaller to get small game like fishers and raccoon. The process is exactly the same, it just shrinks down in size. First thing that's made is an anvil, which is this bed log. The reason for that is when the animal gets clamped between the two logs, you don't want it to be clamped onto this log. You don't want it to dig itself out, which they can do. So you put that down there and they can't get out. And secondly, if their neck gets stuck between them, it's going to get broken. It'll be very humane of a kill. After the bed log's placed in, supports are put in. The first supports have Y sticks on them, so that this crossbar up here can go across. This is very complicated, but just ignore these logs here for now because they're just there for weight. 2 more posts are put at the back to help keep this main log in line. And then they're bound together, not tight because you want this thing to be able to move. You don't want it to be clamped in place, which is often the case when people tie it too tight. You want it to have just enough give for the log to move through, but not enough give for it to fall off and fall out of the aim. After that's placed in, the crossbar is put in and a notch cut, just like a figure 4 deadfall notch. Very similar to this notch. Then this bar is put in and a notch cut in it, very similar to this one. When the two combine, it has a good hinge. The reason for that is if you don't do that, the pole is going to be down here resting on the rope that's up there. And there's not enough leverage for it to spin around. You're putting it up that high, the rope is up there causing leverage. It's going to be a pulley. The final piece you put in other than the main log is a trigger. And the trigger in this one is this piece of alder, which goes from one side to the other, and it's braced against these 2 poles on the outside, and the trigger stick is attached to this upright, which we're talking about there with the notch. So this is going to swing around, just like this one around my hand, when that's given out. All the animal has to do is to press that, and this will come swinging out and spin around, and the log is bound onto it with rope. The log is being held up by that system there. Now these other logs are put on for several reasons, and we're going to keep on adding more logs if we were setting this up for an actual hunt, or, well, trapping. The main reason is to add a lot of weight. The more weight you can put on, the better. These 2 small logs here, I would approximate that they weigh around the weight of 10 pounds each. And each one of these about 15 to 20 pounds. So that's, well, 10, 20, 40, let's say 50, just to be even, 55, 75 pounds of logs. That's not including the main log. This main log is approximately 60 pounds. That's 60 pounds plus 75 pounds. That's over 135 pounds of weight here. Now, due to that, this rope that you're using has to be extremely strong. Now, in a primitive setting, you can take a bunch of spruce roots and braid them together after taking the bark off. And as long as they're strong enough that time, you put them in, they dry into position, and they're strong enough and they'll do the job. They'll only do it once. Another option is to soften up a sapling, such as a willow or an alder or a dogwood, and use it in the exact same way. What we're using here is 550-pound test parachute cord. Main reason is it's 550-pound test. This is 135 pounds. This rope should hold, and it is so far. Now the more logs we add on, the heavier it's going to get. The problem with that for most deadfalls is that instead of the log being held up by a cord above it, it's being held up by sticks underneath it. The more weight you put on those logs or those poles, the more likely they are to give out on you. First off, the stick like this would not be able to hold up 135 pounds on its own. It would need to have other things there to support it. The more supports you put in, the less likely this is going to be hair trigger. Secondly, now that it's under there and it does support the weight, that log comes down, it's not going to budge. And half the time the trigger is actually going to be cemented into place. I've had figure 4 deadfalls with 45 pounds of weight on them, and I can kick them and they'll just pivot in place, just spinning around like that. That's not a good sign. So this technique, using the over the crossbar and locked out here, there's nothing to get in the way of the deadfall itself. It's going to come down. The second reason we have these weights up there is if you keep on adding them, you make a barrier. And that barrier can go along the sides, both sides, the front except for right in the opening, the top and the back. Now you can put a pile of bait in there, say the guts of a bunch of fish, a couple of dead couple of dead pieces of roadkill that you find out in the trail. I'm saying roadkill on a trail, it's kind of funny. Trail kill, let's call it that. Just animals that have died of natural causes, you throw them in there. If you have sugary things, you can throw them in there. Salty things, you can throw them in there. And animals from the size of a squirrel to the size of a bear are going to want to get in there. And all they have to do is walk across this bar. And it's on top of the anvil. And they'll depress and set it off. Now, we only have one trigger here, and as you notice, this trigger is coming up on an angle. In theory, the animal could step over there and not get hurt, which is why we put the trigger up a little higher. Now what you could do is make another one of these, cut the log off back there, and have it completely elevated and held up horizontally above, and the trigger can come straight across like this. The problem with that is if one is set off, you're not guaranteed to have the other set off. So if the animal depresses this side of the log will come crashing down and probably not hit it. And the animal will still get in there and get its food and come back out. So one trigger, there's a lot less chance of it failing on you. Let's see how this thing works. But first off, I want you to notice, I'm back here. I'm not going to be leaning in front to hit that trigger. I'm going to step it over here with a stick and lean back. Reason being, this thing is swinging with the force of 135 pounds behind it. If that thing can hit my jugular, I'll be dead. That's simple. It'll crush my esophagus. I want to be back. So, animal comes in, sniffs the bait, steps on it, and he's dead. We got dinner.